On a list like this, I would hope to see a lot of ultra processed foods. Let's see if that is the case as we keep going down.
Yeah, like oatmeal. One of the recommendations or blog posts put out by a company that sells these things, these are the 10 surprising foods that are spiking your glucose. And presumably they're putting this information out there because people should be worried about these foods. So the first one here is orange juice. And I spoke a bit about orange juice, and there are antioxidants in there. You are better off probably eating the whole orange versus drinking the orange juice generally. But, an athlete, carbing up, fueling up with some quickly absorbing sugars in orange juice versus a diabetic having a glass of orange juice at breakfast, two very different scenarios.
Agreed. The main downside of orange juice, it is a relatively calorically dense food that you can consume very quickly that often does not have a lot of fiber in it. Of course, some orange juices have more or less fiber, but it's still a minimally processed food. So on a list like this, I would hope to see a lot of ultra processed foods. Let's see if that is the case as we keep going down.
Yeah, like oatmeal. So it's interesting that they say off the bat that oatmeal is associated with reduced heart attack risk and weight loss. There's a lot of supporting data for oatmeal, and I think it's because most people are getting not very much fiber, 10, maybe 15 grams per day. So it's interesting to see oatmeal kind of demonized here because, it spikes glucose. Now, there is a difference between a packet of oatmeal that has 20 grams of sugar in it and like whole oats that you are like presumably cooking longer versus instant oats.
Yeah.
But in general, like people aren't fooled when they see a box of oatmeal that is cinnamon sugar flavored with 20 grams of sugar in a packet thinking, oh, this is going to reduce my chance of heart disease. People are not being tricked by that, just like they're not tricked by Pop-Tarts having a label that says vitamins and minerals on it. No one thinks it's a health food.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of nuance here, but singling out oatmeal as a whole, I don't think is a great idea.
The next one is non-dairy milk. I don't hate this one just because, as people know, one of my favorite diets is the 0 liquid calorie diet, and this would consist of liquid calories. Occasionally, we give an exception of a protein shake that has less than a gram of 2 fat and a gram or 2 of carbohydrate, and this is often very high in carbohydrates. That being said, it's not like non-dairy milk is an ultra processed food high in trans fat or very high in sugar. Some of them have much worse macronutrient profiles, like perhaps oat milk, and some are really not too bad.
Yeah, so again, it depends on the label, and on myself, I'm going to pick dairy milk over non-dairy milk. Next up on our list is avocado toast, which is an interesting choice because avocado toast potentially has more fiber in it than the average person gets during their whole day if we're looking at the population. So I suppose they put this in here because it's trendy and it will trigger some people.
Yeah, they're trying to get Gen Z to reconsider their diet, the hipsters. So I like avocado toast a lot. Next is soup. So this is a highly specific recommendation. They talk about how soup is often packed with metabolically friendly vegetables, whatever those are, beans, lean meats, and that's great. And then some canned and restaurant soups have a lot of added sugar. So I think that is a wonderful point. In my opinion, things like soup and things like pasta sauce, tomato sauce, there is just no reason to have added sugar in those things, and there often is. So I think that's a great recommendation.
Next up, bean and veggie burgers. So I think there's a huge difference between a Beyond Meat burger and a bean burger.
Yep.
The bean burger is going to have a lot more fiber, generally going to be a healthy thing, whereas the Beyond Meat burger, just to name one that people are familiar with, tends to actually have, I think I saw a comparison where there's just as much, if not slightly more saturated fat and less protein. So yes, it doesn't contain animal products, but it seems to be an inferior food in just about every regard. I'm sure there's other examples where perhaps there's some that are not as high in saturated fat out there, but Off the hand, I think it's odd to put these two in a single comparison.
Yeah, I would have titled this high saturated fat plant-based meat replacement.
I think that would be appropriate.
As people know, I do love consuming lots of plant-based foods. I just like to consume it with animal-based foods. I know that at times I like to combine, sometimes I eat bean burgers and veggie burgers as well, low in saturated fat. Put one patty of that on, and then one patty of like your bison from Kansas, or one of the ground beefs that we get from one of the farmers near here. Not that you have to do that at all, but it can be a good source of protein and nutrients as well.
You can also send the burger back at the restaurant and say, I wanted one of these patties to be a bean burger. Keep all three, and then you have a triple burger. It's a little life hack.
It's a good hack. The next is grapes. So, are they trying to avoid candy?
Screams in resveratrol.
Yeah. Not that resveratrol, perhaps it's a bit overhyped. Previously, nobody knew about it. And then I guess David Sinclair mentioned it. It just got so popular. It's not the only antioxidant out there. But grapes are not evil. They can be high in calories. But consuming grapes themselves is going to be better than consuming grape juice. Arguably, grape juice would be worse for metabolic health and spiking your glucose than orange juice, just because it has less fiber. But I would have liked to see something like some sort of candy on here. Speaking of that, there are some energy bars or health bars that are essentially candy.
Like a Snickers.
Is Snickers supposed to be an energy bar?
You get a little bit of a sugar rush, and that gives people energy.
Snickers also turn you from your hangry self into your normal self again. But they also spike your glucose.
It's a mood stabilizer.
Yeah. But isn't there peanuts in there or something that stabilizes your blood glucose?
Yeah. And when you look at some of the brands, the bars out there that purport to be health foods, they look remarkably similar and taste remarkably similar to something like a Snickers or a Butterfingers. So generally the tastiest products, not always, but generally those ones are going to be the least healthy. And if you're picking a protein bar, you are probably going to want to optimize the gram of protein to calorie ratio. So if something is 20 grams of protein and 200 calories, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. If it's 20 grams of protein and 400 calories, that's not a great protein source.
I have a good formula of how to make a protein crisp. You take a recipe similar to a Crunch bar, and then you replace whatever the crispy thing is with a soy crisp. A lot of these protein bars have 6 grams of soy crisp that gives it a nice little crunch. And that's not terrible to enjoy from time to time, but it's essentially just a Crunch bar with extra soy crisp.
And now we have brown rice. So this is interesting. Brown rice certainly is less glycemic than white rice. And I suppose if you are consuming brown rice in isolation, you will see a glucose spike just because it is carbohydrate. But it's a better choice than white rice generally. Some people don't tolerate brown rice because of the fiber content. But generally, this is part of a mixed meal. I think of brown rice also having black beans in it, usually some protein source like a meat. So I can't imagine that would be a particularly terrible meal. Although the caveat there is, since rice is a very small granule, you do have more surface area for the carbohydrate to be absorbed. So I suppose slowing down when eating rice would be a reasonable recommendation to take away from this.
Yeah, this is another way to say rice is not a food of low caloric density. Things like cauliflower or broccoli or zucchini have lower caloric density. And there's a lot of ways that you can say, yes, what matters most for metabolic health is calories in, calories out. So I guess this is a reasonable enough recommendation. But at the same time, if this person is quite metabolically healthy, then I wouldn't recommend removing rice, and certainly not brown rice, from the diet.
Yeah, and I would assume that most of the consumers of these CGMs are metabolically healthy, looking to become further metabolically healthy. I don't think it's primarily people with diabetes that are going out and purchasing their own CGMs.
Yep. The next one is sweet potatoes. So this kind of reminds me of brown rice. It's like, well, why did they specifically call out brown rice? Why not just rice? Why sweet potatoes? It's probably because brown rice and sweet potatoes are seen as healthy and they're trying to be a little sensationalist. But yeah, again, sweet potatoes are a food of good nutrient density and they have a pretty solid amount of fiber as well. But they are not a food of low caloric density.
Yeah, I feel personally attacked by this one. I know that my sweet potatoes, they do have a significant amount of sugar in them, but they also have about half that amount of fiber. So it may be 20 grams of sugar, but about 10 grams of fiber, which I think is a pretty good trade-off, and they're full of good flavonoids. So I am going to shamelessly defend sweet potatoes because I am owned by Big Sweet Potato.
That seems good.
For full disclosure.
I guess one interesting side tangent from that would be the concept of net carbs. So people who go by net carbs often subtract the amount of carbs by the amount of fiber, but it's not like your body will subtract those carbs and say, all right, we're not going to use those carbs. We agree to play, you ate enough fiber, congratulations. But at the same time, for health reasons, and maybe net carbs is not the perfect way to think about it, but those who dismiss net carbs are also kind of dismissing fiber in the diet. So yes, the fiber in the diet is extremely important, probably more important than the average person realizes, but at the same time, the concept of net carbs is not entirely correct.
Yeah. And so I think the main takeaway in our talking points from this is, like, I think a shocking number of people don't know how much fiber they're getting per day. And when they look at like reported food intakes, it's exceedingly low. It should probably be about 3 to 4 times where it is if we're looking at population health and what's going to move the needle.
Mm-hmm.